안녕하세요, 원다입니다. 세계적인 한국학의 대가로 꼽히는 하버드 출신 마크 피터슨 교수와 UCLA 존 던컨 교수는 한국학을 연구한 기간만 30년이 넘는 한국 역사 전문가들이십니다. 이 두 분이 공통적으로 주장하는 것은 한국의 역사가 한국인들이 생각하는 것보다 훨씬 훌륭하다는 것과 한국인들은 우리가 생각하는 것보다 훨씬 멋진 민족이라는 것입니다. 일제치하 시절 일본에 의해 심어진 잘못된 역사관 때문에 많은 한국인들은 한국이 약소국이었기 때문에 수많은 침략에 시달렸다 라고 잘못 알고 있다며 그들은 역사적 증거와 근거를 바탕으로 여러 강의에서 이러한 사실들을 지적해왔습니다. 한국은 거의 대부분의 침략을 막아낸 훌륭한 나라입니다. 나라가 세워진 이래 중국의 27개 왕조가 세워지고 무너지는 동안 한국은 오직 7개 왕조만이 바뀌었다고 존 던컨 교수는 말합니다. 이 말은 한국 각 왕조의 존속기간이 그만큼 길었다는 것이며 이것은 한국의 각 왕조들이 중국의 왕조들보다 실속적으로 훨씬 강했음을 뜻합니다. 몽골의 침략이 극에 달했을 때 온 나라는 무너졌어도 고려는 꿋꿋이 버텨냈듯이 말입니다. 또한 유럽 중세시대 대부분 한 나라가 100에서 200년 존속한 것이 고작이었지만 같은 시기의 신라는 1000년을 버텼다고 마크 피터슨 교수는 말합니다. 그만큼 우리 민족은 자신의 나라를 외세의 침략으로부터 잘 지켜내어왔던 민족이었습니다. 예일대에서 역사학을 전공하고 조지 워싱턴 대학에서 로스쿨을 졸업한 이민진 작가는 한국이 외세의 많은 침략을 받은 이유로 한국의 지리적 위치를 꼽았습니다. 웨슬리 대학에 특별 초청된 이민진 작가는 학생들과 교수진들이 모인 웨슬리 대학의 강당에서 한국은 지리적 특성 때문에 앞으로도 항상 세계 주요 강대국들이 주요 관심사에 놓여있을 거라고 말합니다. 소설 파친코의 일부분을 학생과 교수진들에게 읽어준 후 이민진 작가는 웨슬리 대학의 영문학 교수인 한국계 미국인 교수와 함께 파친코 속 인물 및 실제 일본에서 살고 있는 한국인들의 실상에 대해서 토론합니다. 강대국들의 침략에도 좌절하지 않는 한국인들에 대해 이야기하며 이민진 작가는 적들의 침략이라는 도전 때문에 오늘날 우리 민족이 품위를 잃지 않는 민족으로 더욱 돋보이고 있으며 강인함과 회복력을 가진 민족이라는 사실 또한 세계에 드러날 수 있었다고 말합니다. 또한 이러한 유산을 가지고 있는 한국인들이 각자의 기질에 따라 주어진 어려운 상황과 모진 세상을 어떻게 헤쳐나가고 있는지에 대해서도 이야기합니다. 뿐만 아니라 미국 이민자로서 자신의 모습과 일본에 살면서 심각한 차별을 받아온 제1동포들을 비교하며 일본이 얼마나 한국인들에게 나쁜 짓을 해왔고 지금도 그러고 있는지를 고발합니다. 또한 많은 미국 학생들과 미국 교수진들 앞이었음에도 불구하고 이민진 작가는 미국이 한국에게 잘못한 점에 대해서도 바로 지적하는데요. 함께 들어보시죠.
Professor Ko has some questions he will put to men and they will discuss them.
Thank you for that beautiful reading.
Oh, thank you.
I'm famished. I want to go home now and start eating some kimchi. You talk very movingly about how your father lost his family at the age of 16 because of the Korean War, and how this kind of trauma is, as you say, an unspoken legacy for so many. And you've spoken equally movingly of how drawn you are to the strength and grace that such people live their lives with as they endure this legacy. And so it's in this connection that I'd like to ask you about Pachinko, where so many of the characters harbor some kind of a traumatic legacy like this. They display amazing resilience and grace, but there's also the sense that at another level they continue to live compromised and even emotionally incomplete lives, as though somehow a sense of lack was inevitable. So can you talk a little bit about this sense of incompletion that accompanies the characters despite that grace and strength and resilience that they display?
That's a great question. And I think the whole idea of grace doesn't exist without harm, right? You wouldn't feel grace and you wouldn't see resilience unless you have challenges and opposition. So for me, I studied Koreans, and I guess other people have connected their lives with the very tragic history of Korea, this very amazing little peninsula that is geographically trapped in a difficult contest of powers. So it isn't necessarily always that Korea is so unique, except for the fact that because of its geography, it will always be in the interest of major powers around the world. And consequently, Korea has had this 5,000-year history, much of which filled with exploitation, invasion. And then you have these people on this land who have had to endure all these inequities that they didn't create because of their land. And then you have the diaspora. So we have this legacy, and yet somehow within ourselves, I'm going to posit that we are carrying this trauma. We have this intergenerational trauma and the experience of what our parents endured and also what we're going through. So also a post-colonial history, which we're experiencing. And so even if we have young parents, they didn't experience colonialism, not directly. However, they have family members who might have experienced colonialism, and consequently their sense of incompleteness because you can't finish the thing that you never made. That's the thing, it's like if you're invaded in any way, interpersonally or as a society, you didn't make this thing, but somehow you have to fix it, repair it, get outside of it, and what will you do? And I think that in terms of this plot of the novel, my characters are constantly going like, okay, what do I do next? What can I make the best of it? And some people internalize all this inequity, and others work around it, and some give up. I think incompleteness is a condition that all of us experience existentially. It's incredibly difficult. And what's interesting to me as I get older, and if there are any biologists or geneticists here, I'm curious about temperament. Because some people can take that incompleteness and say, I want more, and some people just say it'll never be enough. So it becomes a situation where personality is determined. So you can all start with the exact same situation, but people respond to it so dramatically differently. So that's interesting to me as I get older.
How your experience as an immigrant informed the picture of Koreans in Japan, and in particular whether the picture of discrimination that we have in colonial and post-colonial Japan reflects or differs from the experience you had as someone growing up in Queens.
The worst things that have happened to me in America are nothing compared to what the Korean Japanese have suffered institutionally. I never had, as a Korean American, in my personal experience, where I felt my government was against me. Now, that's different for people who might have experienced the Chinese Exclusion Act or the internment camps. But as a Korean American, I didn't experience those. Even if you look at the long history, I guess the worst thing that we can say as Koreans is how the United States was so instrumental in dividing the nation in the parallel, because that's what happened. It was two American young guys who had never been to Korea who divided the country in half. It's true. Dean Acheson was one of them. Anyway, and then you also have the prevalence of the U.S. military in Korea, and that's a very controversial topic. But having said that, I felt like Korean Americans are so friendly and bouncy compared to the Korean Japanese, who were very serious. And I guess they had to be really serious because so many weird things had happened to them. And Korean Japanese, the government did things that were so unspeakably difficult toward them. So for example, during the colonial era, the Korean Japanese who were on the land of Japan had Japanese citizenship. After the war, they were stripped of their citizenship. So they became stateless. So imagine being born in a country and you're stateless. And you try to go back home, if you want to go back home, and the government says to you, they're telling you that you're limited in the funds that you could take back. So maybe you don't want to just like take $50 back. Maybe you have assets worth $1,000. So how could you leave? So you can't go back home. So all these things are in operation. And of course, the people who are exposed to radiation. So many tens of thousands of Koreans died during Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And they were not the enemy of the state, but they died and they had absolutely no reparations because they were not Japanese citizens, because they lost their citizenship. So this kind of stuff that happened to the Korean Japanese and the legacy of it, and there's a lot more. And I was so struck by how they still really worked around their difficult situations. And I think that for me, the reason why I can feel much more joy and optimism is because I was treated so well in Queens. I mean, I don't know what your experience was like, but I've had friends from Asian Americans who are different parts of the country where they had very difficult time. I did not.
I survived. And, you know, I Will Survive is the anthem of Wellesley.
Right.
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 세상에서 가장 먼저 한국인이라는 정체성이 확립되었다는 우리 민족은 이민진 작가의 말처럼 적들의 도전에도 꿋꿋한 강인함으로 이겨내고 탄력적인 회복력으로 극복해내며 언제나 품위를 잃지 않는 민족임이 세상에 드러났습니다. 한국은 스스로의 힘으로 민주주의를 실현했으며 다른 이들의 아픔을 공감할 줄 아는 민족이기에 지금 전 세계 많은 사람들이 한국에게 환호를 보내고 있는지도 모릅니다. 여러분의 생각은 어떠신가요? 시청해주셔서 감사합니다. 원다였습니다.